Okay, we're going to go ahead and get rolling now just to stay on schedule. I'm going to go ahead and post again the link to the Fig Jam. If you haven't joined, I encourage you to join us in the fun Fig Jam. I'm going to do a quick introduction here and talk a little bit about Friends of Figma San Diego, and then I'm going to hand it over to Noah. Friends of Figma San Diego, we are one of the chapters of the Friends of Figma groups that are around the country. Noah heads up the iconography. So there are some that are subject matter based, some that are location based. We're in San Diego, which right now we probably have people joining from all around the country, if not the world. We've found that during the last couple of years, it's been a little bit of a different. So social interaction over virtual events like this. We will be having in-person events, hopefully in the near future. Again, look forward to seeing people. Who we are, it's a free community. We encourage everybody that wants to join. We do all kinds of events, different types of virtual things, from panels, workshops like today, all the way up to just meet and greets in person at one of the many breweries around San Diego. I head up the chapter, and Michelle works with me to make sure we put on some great events. You can join, it's free. I encourage you to do so. Then you'll get an email every time we set up a new event like this great one today. And we're always looking for feedback. There's a link here. I really appreciate it at the end of the event. If you wouldn't mind just dropping us a few, it's like a 5-question survey just to tell us what kind of events we can do in the future to make sure the community is growing and that we're providing the right types of content and events to keep Figma increasing its presence here in San Diego and in the design community at large. Just a quick update. If you've never used FigJam, you can do fun things in here while we're going. So you can do all these fun emotes. So you can come in here, like I'm emoting on the agenda right now. It's always fun to see some action and kind of have everybody interacting. So what's on the agenda today? So after I'm done blabbing on, I'm going to hand it over to Noah. And Noah's going to introduce himself and then walk us through the presentation and workshop. We will have some time, hopefully, if people add some questions for Q&A towards the end, and then we'll wrap it up in about an hour. So it's a relatively short session today. I see that people are already having some fun with the Tell Us About You. I'm so excited. That makes me happy. You can do two things. You can drop a sticky in there. That's fantastic. You can also make a magic card. Just go to town, have fun with that. Some people, I've seen some impressive magic cards. Not to make it too daunting for everybody here, but just saying, like, I've seen some good ones. I mean, you'd have to kind of like go out of your way to impress the team here. You'll also notice there's a section down here for questions for Noah. So if you're going through and you have a question, please drop a sticky in there in FigJam, and I'll start kind of curating those and make sure that we have some common questions or some interesting thoughts there to talk about towards the end. And if you have any announcements of your own, if you're doing events, if you have some Figma things that you want to share with the community, or you just want to capture some notes, that is definitely possible. Just put it into the section called Random Notes. And we'd love to hear any feedback you have or any links to tutorials, other resources that would be useful for the community. Please feel free to drop them in. I just posted another link to the FigJam there. I'll do it a few more times as people start trickling in. But with that, I will turn it over to Noah. Noah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Yeah. So as Aaron said, I am Noah. I'm Noah Jacobus. I am also leading a Friends of Figma chapter focused on iconography, as he mentioned. So feel free to hop into our links and various things too. We just started last year and we've had a few events. Currently, we're trying to work our way through some fun little interviews and workshops with some various icon personalities. Our last event was with Jory Raphael, who is the lead icon designer for Font Awesome, if you're familiar with them. And we've got a couple more exciting ones hopefully coming soon. And when I'm not doing that, I am the principal icon systems designer for MetaLab, which is a design agency based out of British Columbia. We've worked with pretty much everyone at this point, but we've done a lot of big names. We've worked with Amazon, we worked with Pitch, we've worked with Neuralink. We've done tons of stuff. You should check us out. And yeah, icons are kind of my bread and butter. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk with you about them today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get rolling. So yeah, why am I here talking about icons today? I get that question sometimes. How did I get involved in this space originally? I've always drawn super small. I don't know why. Ever since I was really young, I always doodle super tiny. Didn't know why then, but after years of drawing tiny pictures, I think I've kind of figured it out. An icon set is kind of like a microcosm of a product or a brand, just on a very small scale. Through what the icons depict and how, you can kind of glean a lot about what a product is and how it functions and how you should feel while interacting with it. I meant to go ahead and jump over to this delightful GIF of myself as I'm talking about it. So in light of that, their importance and their function, why isn't more care given to icons? That's kind of the question I started asking myself. They seemed like they were often like an afterthought, if they were thought about at all, sometimes not changing at all from like the wireframes of a product through the final deliverables, like they wouldn't change. It was just some placeholders. And I do know that, of course, like due to scope and budget and other requirements, not every project that you work on is going to call for custom icon work. But relying on stock icons is kind of the same as relying on stock photography. Like it functionally does the job, but it's generic, it's unownable. It doesn't speak to your brand or your product's particular strengths and quirks. So the way that I kind of use this idea to like sell the idea to the stakeholders or clients or coworkers about why custom work would be good is maybe the set that you're working with isn't extensive enough or expandable. Like maybe it has bad or inconsistent rules that you can't really build on. Maybe what you're working on is using uncommon or new visual metaphors. Maybe it's really workflow heavy and has some tools that you need to represent that just don't exist in a lot of stock icon sets. Or what I run into most of the time, maybe there's some really funky interface or type choices in the product that should be reflected or contrasted in the iconography. So we are, chatting through icons, specifically in their usage in Figma, of course, but beyond just, thinking about the tools at play here, hopefully what we talk about here today will at least give you a foundation to maybe pick a better icon set that will serve your product's needs, or identify problem areas in a set that you can avoid or correct. Figure out a set's rules to expand upon. That's actually what we're going to look at the very end in the little workshop piece. We're going to have like a little sample set and kind of pick it apart and try to make a tab bar to match. And then you can also hopefully think through iconography as part of a cohesive branding and product experience and not just, kind of a nice coat of paint at the end. So let's talk about style. So kind of the big question, what is an icon? There's lots of interpretations of that word and a lot of different usages for it, of course. The one that's probably most helpful for our purposes today comes from my friend Meg, who used to lead the illustration teams at both Lyft and Shopify. And she says in one of her excellent articles, an icon is a symbol representing a larger idea. It's one of those things that you shouldn't notice when it's done really well, but you always notice when it's done poorly. But above all else, an icon should be something you can easily interact with. It should be intuitive. It should concisely capture the idea it represents. Simple, no problem, right? That covers a lot of ground. So in the interest of time, as I mentioned, we'll just be focusing on like UI or system icons in a mobile product. But there's a whole wild, wonderful icon world out there. But in a mobile product, that's where you can let an app's personality really shine. So where to begin? Another pointer from one of my favorites, Alex, who is a designer at Bungie now, got off the freelance train. And Alex says that the start of any design project is overwhelming when you're staring down that blank page, and finding restrictions to impose on yourself can focus your attention and lead to more creative solutions. By considering an icon's context, you're immediately able to tick off a number of decisions and direct your focus accordingly. And this is something I say all the time, that limitations are your friend and you can learn to love them. Hence the title of this talk. One of the things that I hear most often about icon design from people who are maybe unfamiliar with the craft or are specializing in other areas is that icon design sounds miserable, that there's so little space, you know, you're making an arrow for the 300th time, like it must be bad. And there's so little space. Well, while that is true that you're working in a very small area, like embracing those constraints can simultaneously do a lot of work for you and free up your mind for new ideas. Like rather than just having that blank canvas, there's so many decisions that have already been made for you that you can kind of think outside the box. No pun intended. So let's jump ahead. Excuse me. Imposing limitations on yourself is one of the most valuable things you can do in any form of design, really. Not only can it save a lot of headaches down the road, but if you understand and plan for them, it allows your creativity to flourish once you've narrowed that scope. So let's start with the basics and foundation here. Beginning with a common grid system and a set of aesthetic rules is a great place to start when you begin working with icons. So this is it. This is where I live. Just like Tron, I live on the grid. The skeleton of every icon set is its underlying grid system. If you've used Gmail or YouTube or any other Google product in the last decade, probably, you're probably already very familiar with the material icon system, which is built on a 24 by 24 grid, just like this. And that's a fairly common size in a lot of design that uses the 8-point grid system. But other multiples of 8 can be pretty common. I've seen icons that go, 8 by 8, all the way up to 64 by 64 or more, though that can sometimes start infringing on spot illustration territory. But this is the bones of it. This is how you can help maintain balance and regularity in your icons. And a discussion about icons as a next step really wouldn't be complete without mentioning key lines like this. And this was really a revelation for me when I first started figuring this out. Thanks again to Google Material Design for pointing this out to me for the first time years ago. Key lines like this are guides that help keep your icons visually balanced, regardless of the orientation of their component parts. As you've probably noticed, most UI icons are based on a handful of core silhouettes. They're, maybe mostly squares and circles and vertical and horizontal rectangles. There are, of course, variations on all these, but key lines help keep your icons balanced when they're seen and used together. So as a quick example, let's take a look at a circle and a square. Your first instinct making icons based on these shapes might be to make their dimensions the same. Maybe they were both 20 by 20. But what we're dealing with is a lot more of visual area. Like if you ever had to find like the area of the shape in math back in the day, then exact exterior dimensions, like at their target size and placement, how are these shapes going to stack up next to each other? The square will invariably feel heavier visually because its geometric area is larger because it's got, these extra spaces in the corners. And a quick way to test this is to kind of add a blur potentially, or to unfocus your eye the same way you might if you were working on print design or something and you want to test the visual hierarchy. You can kind of blur your eyes a little bit and see if the most important stuff is still the most visible. So if we blur them a little bit, you'll see that the square appears larger and heavier, even with that little bit. So what if we apply some key lines to this that we just looked at, and we shave it down ever so slightly like that? When dealing with shapes at such a small scale, shaving off just a couple pixels can make a huge difference. Looking at it like this, and we can see that we've just brought it down a little bit, but they'll look more balanced, even though they're not mathematically the same in terms of their exterior dimensions. Now, these are just basic guidelines, of course, but they provide a great foundation for icon consistency and our base shapes. We can kind of see how that plays out across different kinds of rectangles too, and even extrapolate that into how they might function in an actual icon set. Some other simple shapes based on those. There are, a little bit of tweaks here and there, like the calendar has some bits that come up. The trash can tapers in and there's a hexagon instead of a circle, but they still follow the same basic function of the template. And so we can help them balance with each other. So let's talk about some other common rules that we'll look at and pick apart. Before we get too nitty gritty, probably the one where a lot of icon designers stumble that I see, myself included, I have to fight against this inclination all the time. It's very, very tempting to cram as much content as possible into the space, especially if you're working at an enlarged size without, surrounding screen context. So if you're working in isolation, you're working, you're way zoomed in, or back before I started using Figma for everything, when I would build an Illustrator and I would, work on a larger grid scale. And so my icons would be bigger. It's easy to kind of pack in a bunch of stuff and think it's going to be good. And it's always easier to add elements than remove them. So it's good to err on the side of simplicity and constantly check your icons against their intended context. Where are they going to live in the UI? What are they going to be next to? Are they going to balance well? Like, for example, this looks pretty good if you're working at a blown up size. But once you check it against your target context, in this case, if it were a 16 pixel icon, things can get pretty muddy and pretty illegible quickly. So it's always good to check, just kind of as a general rule. To get a little more granular, some surefire things to consider when we're building a set or checking for inconsistencies, and we'll reference these when we actually look at this icon set that we'll pick apart here in a second. Element size is one of the first ones. It's always good to consider when you're working on an icon that will have potentially some dense areas, to determine what the smallest element needs to be and scale up from there. Cramming in more elements in is always really tempting, but it rarely pays off. This, for example, was where I started when we were doing some iconography for TripAdvisor, and I was going to do kind of a generic dining restaurant type thing. So I thought, okay, I'll just do a crossed, knife and fork. And so I knew for it to be legible, I would want the tines of the fork. That's probably going to be the most detailed thing of this. And so I need to figure that out first and build up from there. So I don't build two utensils and then have no space to add that extra detail, or it feels off. So starting with the detail and then building out from there is always a good thing. Talking about dimensions and perspective, do your icons need to have dimension or perspective baked in? So for example, there's a flat one, maybe one that has something that is moving towards the camera, or something that is perhaps some sort of forced perspective side view. Like, how are these things going to be treated if you want that sort of effect in your icons? And think about how that may impact the entire set as a whole going down. Another one, overlaps. This is very, very common. Speaking of depth from the last one, you can't always communicate complex concepts with singular elements or objects. So a lot of icons rely on juxtaposing two or more elements together, like we just had with that, a pencil on a sheet of paper, for example. Sometimes these need to be on top of each other and not just next to each other. So should the elements, fit snugly together? Should there be some kind of an element or a stroke break between them? Do you want to do some kind of a filled or duotone approach where something is fading into the background or has more depth to it because it's behind another object? Things like that are good to notice and think about. Strokes and corners. This is probably the biggest offender I see in inconsistent icon sets. Nothing makes a weird icon stick out more than mismatched corner treatments and stroke weights. They kind of shine like a beacon, like a mile away, and announce their presence that they don't really belong there. As we can see here in this example, these are a bunch of the rounds we went through when we worked on iconography for Pitch, which is a fantastic new, collaborative presentation software. And experimenting with the various values and detail levels to coordinate with different hi-fi concepts and different aspects of UI that we were kind of throwing out there. And so you can see a lot of the difference, like the basic metaphors remain the same. We tweaked a little bit with the settings as we kind of scaled things up, but trying out a lot of these different treatments for stroke weights and corners and how that adds different characters and how you could easily tell if one of these didn't belong if it shifted a line. Just these small little details you can tell. And if we push forward a little bit, this is actually where we landed on that with them, which was kind of an interesting hybrid between the two, where we did a little bit of rounding and then we had a lot of sharp stroke terminals and how we document some of that and maintain that consistency. We kept pretty rigid with our rules on this and trying to make sure we had the same radius and everything everywhere, which was a lot of fun to work on, but also very stringent and easy to screw up. And finally, something that you can easily tell how icons should function together is through colors and states. Now, this is not one we're really going to touch on much in this, just something to keep in mind. It's a big one when used well, not just from an accessibility or an active and inactive standpoint. As you can see here, this is some work we did very recently for Stir, and we really wanted to make sure that the active and inactive states were different in the navigation, just to help reinforce from an accessibility standpoint what is in focus and not relying solely on a color shift or an opacity shift. One color icons are classic and easy to implement, but a lot of contexts like navigation in this case, or tab bars or things, can really shine with some extra love. And as a side note, like filled versus stroked icons and all that kind of stuff can be a great differentiator to consider when you're implementing a dark mode, but that's another topic for another time. But a quick look through some very simple examples of how injecting a systematic color approach can also be a very interesting thing. This is actually some of the work that I did for FigJam, which you can see in our FigJam file for this event, which is kind of funny. And a look at some other work we did, making different styles for light and dark modes. But all of that said, we're going to take some of the things we just chatted about and we're going to build some icons. So I believe if you go to the FigJam, in the agenda, there should be a link, the workshop, where it says workshop in the FigJam. Actually, I'll just go to it. We can look at it. Should be a link. So if you click on that, let's see if people are going to be able to hop in here. I think I set it to share to everybody. Yes, excellent. Hey, everybody. So what we got here, and let me turn this on so people can see my key commands, hopefully. What we've got here is a pretend project. Let's say you're working with a client and they've been working on a mobile app with maybe something like this that pulls in chats from other sources, just as an example. And they have some icons that they already have that they really love. Maybe it's part of another set. But they don't have what they need for a tab bar for this application. And so we've been tasked with looking at these icons, and they're not stroked. They've just given us some like raw SVGs of filled objects. And so what we need to do is we need to determine what are the rules that these icons are abiding by, and what could we figure out about them to expand on while making them fit in this UI. So maybe there's some clues from the UI we could pick up too to make it feel more integrated. It feels like they already kind of work a little bit well because they're kind of rounded and fun and there's some bubbly stuff going on in the UI already, but some things we'll want to look at for this. So I've kind of got my zone up here, kind of in the samples and the Noah's icon area. But if you would like to dive in with some things that you think you might want to try as we go along, so you can either feel free to like dig it on your own or watch what I'm doing or both. I'm just going to keep talking as I work probably and talk through what I'm thinking about, but feel free to like hop in here, add your name to one of these little slots. And then you've got 4 frames here or 5 frames that you can work on your own tab bar if you feel like it, kind of as we go along. Hopefully you all have Roboto. I think that should work since it's a Google font and you can edit that without any issue. So looking up here, looks like we've got, oh, I saw a comment, AIM, is that even possible? I don't know if it's possible. I just was using the Figma colors and wanted to throw in a yellow. So I went with AOL. I don't even know if they still exist. So let's look at what our tabs even are. So we've got kind of like a home feed, it seems like. There's like chats, like an overview of a chats thing that's being pulled in. There's faves, stickers, activity, and profile. So seems like kind of an overview home experience, maybe something where you can like highlight or pin specific messages of some kind, regardless of source, maybe. Stickers, I don't see any stickers in the UI, but I'm guessing you can have them available, maybe get like different packs or something. And then an activity, so that may be like notifications or something. And then a profile setting. So nothing too out there in terms of metaphors or anything, which is probably good for this. So knowing that, let's look at our samples. So, and they're already 24 pixels, looks like, which is good because that's what we need to put into the tab bar. So if we look at them, we can start picking apart some of those rules we talked about. So we'll be looking at the stroke width and the corners, how treated, how overlaps are treated, stuff like that. And also we can pick into kind of the base shapes of these and kind of assemble some key lines for ourselves for making new ones. So first off, if we zoom way in, we can look way in at the grid. And I think if you don't already have that available, I think that maybe in view, yeah, the pixel grid right there. So if you don't have that view where you can see the little lines, you can turn that on easily. I always love that. I also am a huge fan of Control P in this case, which turns on the pixel preview, which is very important if you're working on icons that maybe don't align completely to the grid. If you're working with like 1.5 pixel strokes, super useful. So you can check it to make sure that people with low density displays are going to get the crispiest version possible. But just a little tidbit there. So if we zoom way in on one of these, actually, I'll just go with something that's pretty standard looking. Look at this calendar. So it looks like that it's 2 pixel strokes, but we've also got a little bit more than your average rounding here. So these aren't sharp, but they're also, if we just had a 2 pixel stroke here that had a rounded corner applied, it wouldn't be this rounded. So it looks like, so if I just maybe added another one here and made it a nice bright color, I can see over the top of it. If I had made this, whoops. If I had made that like that, if it were just a normal rounding from the different joins you can choose from, it is actually not as rounded as this is. So it looks like all the corners have a little bit more rounding applied. So this is maybe a 1. Reduce the opacity there. Yep, okay. So Jordan does a default to 1. For the stroke weight when you put it in, yeah. If you're just doing a brand new stroke, it does default to 1. So we've got like 1, if these are centered, we've got a 1 pixel rounding most of the time, looks like. But all of the stroke ends are sharp. So that's good to keep in mind. So we've got sharp stroke ends, but rounded corners. And they seem to be pretty standardly rounded. This one looks a little bit more rounded. I'm guessing because this may be like log out or something. And so when it's something that is maybe more rounded in the real world, like a phone, it looks like it has a little bit more rounding applied to it, but maybe that's a rule we can bend. So in this case, if we're looking at this one, there is an overlap here where the arrow is kind of coming out. So it looks like there's a clean line break when there's overlapped objects. Same with this photos one. So that's good to keep in mind that overlapping objects are not going to be snug against each other. There is a clean line break there. One other thing I notice about these, that some of these have filled shapes. Like it's not pure strokes, because like this in the middle of the gear and this in the map pin and the tumbler access on the little padlock have larger filled shapes. They seem to be mostly circles in this case, which balance a little bit better, but good to keep in mind that there are some solid shapes in some of these too, and it's not just strokes. So maybe we can capitalize on that too with some of these if we want to add a little bit more detail and don't want to rely solely on strokes. So with that in mind, let's think about key lines. We've got some ideas about how the strokes and the corners and the overlaps are all going to be handled, and the general level of detail as to like how far apart things are from each other. They seem to be pretty open. Like there isn't much that's super crowded. So let's think about key lines. So I made myself a little component ahead of time. And this is something I really like to do when I'm building icon sets. I build one set of key lines, and then I just create instances of that component throughout all of my icons. So that if I ever need to change them or edit the key line set in any way, it's easy to do. So I've got a little starter frame here that I've already got kind of placed in my icons over here. And so what we'll want to determine are those basic silhouettes. So the circle, the square, and the rectangles. And that'll give us a great foundation to build off of. We don't have to, follow them rigidly by any means, but it's great to kind of get a general sense of how the core silhouettes should relate to each other. So something easy to start with that looks like, the envelope is probably a horizontal rectangle. This is probably based on a square, and this is probably based on a circle. So let's actually start and take a look at this so that we know that it's 24 pixels. And I'm just going to make a circle and just trace over it real quick and see. So it looks like, and maybe reduce the opacity a little bit. This seems to be based on a 20 pixel circle. So I might actually just take that circle, copy it, and go over here and dump it in. And I'm actually going to copy the style from the diagonal pieces that were already there and paste it there. So let's say, we'll name it circle. And that auto-populates all of my instances over here, which is great. So that may be a good foundation for circle shapes. So we know that the square, based on what we talked about with the balance, just that little bit of example, the square should probably be a little bit smaller than the circle because it has those extra visual area in the corners that'll make it balance out. So if the circle was 20, let me grab a square here and make a 20 pixel square. And we know we want to get it centered. We know we want it to be a little bit smaller. So if I shrink it down a little bit, I can see that I'm already pretty much lining up with this calendar example. It looks like there's a little bit of an overshoot here with kind of the implication of like spiral binding or whatever, or the ring binding for the calendar. But it seems like the top edge was kind of brought down to help balance that overshoot. So I think that'll work out actually if we just go with an 18 pixel for the square. And that's another point of where keeping some padding in your icons really comes in handy, because you may want to have things where there's a little bit of an overshoot to help visually balance something, and that gives you the room to do it, especially with diagonal icons, because they need to be a little closer to the edge to balance, because they're usually a little bit thinner, so they kind of overshoot. It's a lot like if you've ever done much type design, or if you've ever looked at a typeface really close, where say if you have the word, I don't know, rugby, and the U, the bottom of the U is going to overshoot the baseline a little bit, because if it's flush with the baseline, it looks wrong for whatever reason to the human eye. So it kind of follows that same principle in icon design, where you want to overshoot a little bit and it will actually look visually balanced. It's weird. I don't know. It's the art part of icons and not the science part. But it's still really cool. So we've got a couple of our shapes. And then I think we can do really easily. This is probably just going to be the exact dimensions we need. We can double check, see if we can get a horizontal rectangle off this envelope. I'll just go ahead and copy that. Go over here. Paste that style. Oops. And then we can just handily duplicate it and rotate it. And I think we've got our core shapes. So I'm not going to bother renaming those right now. So we've got a decent set of key lines to get started with. And I've already got those kind of populating my variants over here. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to it, but I did go ahead and make variants that include active and inactive states, but I doubt we'll get through all that. We'll just concentrate on inactive for now. And they wouldn't even have to be that different, but I like to over prepare. I might jump down here and see if anybody else is doing anything. Nope. Okay, that's fine. I know I'm talking a lot and probably being a little distracting, but if you feel like diving into any icons below, please feel free. And you'll still have access to this afterwards, so dig into it all you want and do it at your own pace if you feel like it. So I'm just going to look at the time. I think we're still good on time. So let's look at a couple of these to start. So chats. That might be an easy one to take a cue from the UI on, since we've kind of got these bubbles already going on. Maybe we could just rely on some of that to kind of show the chats, maybe some implication of the UI, these like bubbles of text. With faves, I was actually looking at, and this is ideally you would have a lot more like design documentation based on this than we're going into right now here. So I'm making some assumptions, but looking at maybe that these little sparkles are faves, we can make that assumption for the purposes of this exercise. So thinking maybe we'll rely on some of that imagery for the faves. Stickers, we don't have an example of in the UI, but we can assume of what a sticker is, maybe make it a sticker. Activity, no reason you can't go with like a standard bell if we want to go with kind of that notification history kind of look. And then profile. Some apps will do like if you have a user uploaded avatar, could use that in place of that. Maybe I'll just go with a nice little smiley face to kind of match the playful look of some of the rest of this. So let's try making a chat one based on some of these bubbles. So what I might do, I'm going to dive right in here to chats and inactive, which is on top. I already got my stuff set up. So I might just start with a nice handy rectangle. And something you can do, one of my favorite same key commands as Illustrator, which is what I came from, is hitting Command X, or not Command X, Shift X. And that will swap the stroke and the fill. So super handy when you're getting going to just easy swap something out, change the stroke width to center. And we're going to go with one of the built-in colors here. So what I'm thinking of doing, to kind of give the implication of chats, plural, since that's in the tab bar, is to make a couple of these bubbles that are stacked on top of each other, since we have a precedent for elements that are stacked with that line break. So maybe, let me see, maybe I'll make a nice sized one here. Maybe something like this, and we'll give it a decent amount of rounding just to kind of make it a little pill shape. So it's kind of in between like the little bubbles that show up and the text bubbles themselves. And since I'm thinking I might have these kind of overlap with a little bit of a horizontal offset, so because of that extra space that'll be around them, maybe I'll do a little bit of an offshoot like we talked about. Maybe it'll kind of go off the side a little bit, kind of like this. So what I might do then is real quick, take this top one to get kind of a nice, easy version of something to knock out. Actually, I'm just going to make another rectangle. So make another rectangle. I'll make sure that it goes 2 pixels this way, 2 pixels this way. Just like this. Could have done that a little more simply, but you know, and give it a bunch of rounding so that it will be concentric. And then select that and select that shape and go up here. Oh, sorry, I've got some zoom controls in the way. There we go. And do a subtraction. And my absolute favorite feature of working with icons in Figma is the live Boolean groups. I love it because all of this is still editable. We can, you know, change stuff if we want to after the fact. It's so handy. And some folks are even using this in their design systems for like adding variant modifiers onto icons that they can easily change on the fly, like what is being subtracted is a variant of a thing. And so they can make the cutout shape change later if they need to. And it's great. If you want more info on that, you should watch our last event, Iconography. So that might be a good place to start. And let's see how that kind of looks in context. I've got these set up over here as instances as well. And since this is an active one, maybe I'll just go ahead and make this be blue for now, since we won't really get into the nitty gritty of that. I'm good with that for now. We can come back to that if we want to. And it's still following the rules. We got the 2 pixel strokes. We got nice rounding. We got a sharp cutout that is 2 pixels for the gap. Yeah, I'm good with that. So let's look at faves really quick. Yeah, let's do some of that sparkle. So let's look. So these are kind of little 4-pointed guys. I don't know that I want to go, I definitely won't be able to go as sharp as this because we have to have some of that rounded corner stuff going on. So I might stylize this a little bit to be more geometric, like some of this. So I'll probably just do like a 1-pointed star, maybe add a little bit of stuff around it for balance, maybe some of those solid shapes that were in like the map pin and the cog and stuff. So for this, I might go to the handy dandy pen tool, which is one of my other favorite things. And I mean, I could also potentially start with like a polygon and work up from there. But I think I want to draw this one by hand. So if I'm going to do a 4-pointed star, I'll probably have it come out and touch the edges of our circle keyline. It could overshoot a little bit, but I think I'm going to stick with this. So what I might do is just a simple, maybe something like this. And so this is probably going to be around it and bump it up. So we hit that key line. That's probably going to be a little bit too sharp too, because this is not rounded enough. So on something like this, where it would be a very acute angle, and I might cheat that a little bit, what I might do is add an extra point and then nudge this over a 0.5 pixel, nudge that over, and then give them both rounding. Something like this I might do actually as a little bit of a cheat and move this down. I want to open this up a little bit. So that even though that isn't like the same, it might not be the exact same radius as something like this, but since this is based on like a quarter of a 4 pixel circle like that is kind of that same radius, we can kind of cheat it. Whoops, sorry about that. Get a little bit of whiplash. We can kind of cheat it a little bit. It's not exact because you can't really do tangents in Figma, but we can kind of cheat that a little bit. You could finesse that even more if you wanted to, but that's going to be imperceptible. So I think I'll stick with that. And let me take the rounding off real quick. And what we're going to do is we're just going to duplicate this a bunch. So I'll make this, what is it? Shift H, no, Shift V for doing a vertical flip. We'll take them both, duplicate them, give them a little rotate. I'm liking this. Take them all together. Another one of my favorite things, Command E on Mac, will be to basically flatten them together. So it combines them all into one vector stroke object. And then we can kind of go in and actually give them all the points a nice rounding over here. So I'm actually liking the way that's looking. It's kind of a nice little sparkle. So even though it's not a full circle, because there are a little bit of gaps here, just to kind of help with that balance, I'm thinking to kind of imply some of that same kind of grouping that we saw in the emoji. Maybe I'll add a couple more little visual or little artifacts that are reminiscent of these filled objects and some of the other icons. So I might just go in and add like a couple circles on the diagonal, like maybe a big one, maybe a little one. Maybe not make it exactly diagonal, add a little bit of visual flavor to it. And make these the same. Is that one the same? No, we'll add that one. Then I'll turn off my key lines so I can see how it looks in context. Yeah, I'm liking that. A little bit of faves. Reminiscent of that a little bit. That's kind of nice. Cool. let's keep trucking. We got time. Let's keep trucking. We can get through the inactive ones at least, and then we can see how much time we have left if anyone has questions. So let me do a sticker real quick. We'll make this one quick. One thing that's nice to keep in mind with, especially like a tab bar like this, is to rely heavily on your different keyline silhouettes to make sure that maybe not all of them are kind of following the same template. Like you wouldn't want 5 icons in a row that are all based on a circle. So if we kind of do, like my plan here is this is kind of circular, but mostly kind of like a puckered diamond kind of thing. If this is mostly horizontal, maybe we can make the sticker more square based. The bell can be more vertical, and then another more proper circle. Then we can have 5 very distinct shapes, and that helps them stay more recognizable from a user standpoint too. Easier to scan different shapes. So yeah, let's do a square since we haven't really done a square thing. So I'll start just with a rectangle, blow it out, Command X to reverse it. And we'll get that nice hitting the key line here. And we'll give it a little bit of that rounding. So that's a good foundation for the sticker. And what I want to do is I want to kind of have the edge peeling up, like a physical sticker might be. So for that, what I can do is I might just actually, another handy thing, if you go into any vector object like this and hit return, or you can double click, you can go directly into Vertices Editing mode, and it'll automatically kind of suggest to you on a straight line where a center point should go. Super handy. So in this case, I'm going to add a couple center points so that I can just take this corner. Oh, it didn't stay because I clicked in the wrong place. I can take this corner and essentially just fold it up into the center. Vector networks, super great in Figma. And if you don't know, they just actually added the ability to be able to do different fill colors in different parts of vector networks, which is insane. I've been waiting for that for a long time. So that might work. And I might actually make these two a little more rounded since they would kind of be that curl happening. So maybe closer to like a 3. But that can be played by ear kind of. And then what we'll need is probably a little bit of an edge. So I could probably do this as a vector network for the purposes of time. I might just draw a separate edge that could be flattened together. But so if I just did something like, let's do like there. Yeah, why not? There to there to there. I'll copy this one style too and bring it over, and then round this up too, but a little bit more, maybe not that much. Maybe something like that. Actually, maybe I'll move these points in slightly. I think I'm good with that for now. So maybe something like that for a nice little sticker. Actually, I'm going to take a cue from some of these more rounded ones like the phone, since a sticker would be kind of die cut and wouldn't really have sharp corners. I think I'm going to go ahead and just pretend that these are a little bit more rounded. So bring in some of that extra flavor. We can kind of bend that rule, but yes, I like that. And then always check your stuff in context just to kind of see. Yeah, I'm liking that. I'm liking that. Might clean that up more later, but I think that's good. For the bell. Yeah, so that's going to be a little bit more vertical. So we're going to look to this kind of vertical rectangle as kind of our guide, but we can play around with that a little bit and overshoot potentially. So for this, I might, again, just start with a rectangle, and we'll do a little style copy. Pull that over. But I do want to maybe bring it in a little bit. I think what I want is to have a little bit of this. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to add like the little bell portion at the bottom, or the clapper, I guess it's called, the part that actually makes the ringing. And then I might add a little bit of an ornamentation to the top that's reminiscent of some of these filled objects too. So I'll bring it down ever so slightly from the top, just to have a little bit of room up there. And then I'll bring up the lip of it to maybe here. I'm trying to think, how big do I want the clapper bit to be? Maybe try something like this. And we will cut it in half. Oh, no, I think it's going to be too big. So that was like a 6. So let's try a 4. Ah, there we go. I'm liking this. I think this is probably going to be a good proportion, keeping that in the middle probably. And then I will probably want to do a little bit of a flare out of the bell, of course, but keep it in style. So I'm going to add an extra point here and maybe pull this out. And I think I will take advantage of a little bit of these overshoots. Since I'm narrowing it towards the top, I can flare out the bottom and kind of pull out a little bit, and that should hopefully balance. So we'll add a couple more points and pull those in, maybe down to here-ish. Actually, I want all of these down a little bit more. And then I can take these two and round them up really high. Yeah, something like that. I think might work out really well. And then I'll add, I can actually reuse one of these elements. I'll just take this little guy, or this little one maybe. And goodness sakes, there we go. And then add some of that little ornamentation, but I don't want it to hang down inside. So I can enter, delete a point, and then actually rejoin these two. Command J, if you've got 2 points selected, rejoin them. And then we can have a little bit of a nice little character on the top. Let's turn off those key lines and see how they look. Yeah, that's good. This might be a little too tight right in here, but that could be adjusted later just because there haven't been other things that have been kind of that snug. But in the interest of time, we can come back to that. So one last one to hit, and then we can maybe see what else we got going on. The profile. So this is just going to be a straight up circle, I think. If we just want to do a nice little face, I think that's going to be the way to go. There we go. Paste the style over. So what I'll probably want to do, I don't know that I want to do circles for you guys. I think if I want to keep it smiling here, I think what I might do, I'm actually going to take this same, if we can keep some shape continuity going, I might just do something like that and pull that over so it kind of looks like, you know, a little smiley, a little sunny disposition. And then if we want to add a little smiley face, I can just take a portion of another circle. So I might just duplicate what I've already got, kind of pull it, yeah, maybe there. So maybe it would kind of be in the same radial area as the eyes, kind of form a complete inner circle. And I don't know that I want, that's a little too cheerful. So I might actually add some points in here to adjust this ever so slightly, to be maybe more on this line. And we'll see how that goes. Yeah, that's a little more normal, not as desperately happy. So I think like even looking at these in relation to these, I think that they're melding really well. Like, as I said, there may be some little tweaks you'd want to make with balance and maybe that being a little too tight. But yeah, I think in context, those are actually going to work out really well. But, oh, excellent. Oh, that's cool to see some of these down here. That's fun. I do like that thinner style. That's a nice little foundation. That's a nice character. But yeah, I think we're going to have to call it there. But yeah, feel free to keep playing around in here if you feel like it. It'll stay open. So no time limit there. But yeah, I think we'll have to call the workshop there for now. But stop sharing for the moment.
Noah, thank you so much. That was amazing. I wish we could spend another 2 hours going through this and seeing what everybody would produce and kind of having you coach everyone along. I think this has been tremendously valuable and can't thank you enough. There were a couple questions. Unfortunately, I'm going to be short on time to get to them today, but what we can do is post them into the event information. So maybe we can answer those offline and make sure that we post those into the Friends of Figma San Diego page.
Absolutely.
And to those who are curious, we will have the video up on YouTube, hopefully in another week or so. So if you missed it or thought this was great and want to share it with your colleagues or friends, or maybe there was somebody who was on the fence about Figma because they were like, no, it's not Illustrator, I can't do great icons. You can send them this video and Noah will show how possible it is for Figma to be a great icon tool. Noah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Just a kind of another shout out. Please join Friends of Figma Iconography. Help grow that team, help grow that community, making sure that we continue the march towards icon greatness through Figma. And if you haven't joined yet, please join Friends of Figma San Diego. Tell your friends, tell your family. We're all big Figma fans already, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who you can help convince. So let's get them on the bandwagon. This has been great. Thank you for joining. We will be posting new events in the near future. And if you can, please fill out the survey. Let me grab that link one last time so that you can give us that feedback that we so desperately want. And posting that into the Zoom chat. So thank you, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you at the next event. Thanks, Noah.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.